Hi gang, it's Julie Creffield and today I'm talking about how you create your marathon training plan. Now, a lot of people who sign up for their first marathon get really panicky about what plan they're going to follow, and they often will look at books or magazines or online training plans that are kind of the opposite of bespoke. Let's just put it that way. They're generic. That's the word I was looking for. They're generic. They're a one-size-fits-all approach to building up to race day. And when you think about that with a sensible brain, you must know that that cannot work. Okay, so I'm a massive advocate of creating your own plan. Now, I know there'll be people that are nervous, and there may also be ladies that have run a marathon before, so it's slightly different for you guys. So if you want to find an online marathon plan to reference and to take inspiration from, that's fine, but I really do think you should create your own, and these are the reasons why. You know your life better than anybody else, and for you to get the best out of your marathon training, it has to work for you and your family and your work, yeah? You also know, according to where you live in the country and your schedule and stuff like that, when you are able to race, and having some races in the diary is really, really important. So if you get a generic plan, it's going to tell you when you should be at half marathon, and it might be that for you half marathon comes sooner or it comes later. So I think a lot of people start off marathon training with all these big intentions, and they download a plan and they start ticking off the sessions, and then it becomes hard. They start missing sessions, then they start feeling shit about themselves, and then all hell breaks loose, and it's all about kind of doing, trying to play catch up really, or just doing as much as they can to prepare, but not, training harder, not smarter, if that makes sense. So I feel like and this is based on my advice of how I've trained for marathons in the past, but also how I've helped other women and kind of what I've seen for the women that have done really, really well and for the women that have really struggled and maybe not enjoyed the experience so much. So that is what I'm basing this advice on. Now, I went through this basically yesterday, and this is the reason why I asked you to think about your times. Times are not important to me. I don't care how fast you go round. You will. You might think you don't, and you might think that getting round is enough, and of course it is enough. But I think there comes a time when you cross the finish line where you say to yourself, could I have done better? And it's not about whether you could have done better in the race, although there are some things, some tips that I can give you to make sure that you go as fast. And actually it's not even fast, it's as efficient is what you want on race day. You want efficiency. But I think it's more to do with what you do in training, okay? So, what you will need to progress with your training plan is a couple of the 12-week planning documents, which I've put in the Facebook group for you to download. Don't be precious about this. You might need to download a few of them, print them out, chuck them away, scribble on them. As I said, don't be precious. So I think your marathon training comes in 3 phases. I think the first phase, which is the phase that you're in now, is around establishing a routine and building your fitness. I don't think you need to particularly worry about technique-based sessions or kind of more technical ones like speed sessions and hills. I think you should just be focusing on running 3 times a week and building up your strength, your conditioning of your body, focusing on nutrition. If you've got weight to lose and you really, really want to kind of focus on that, this is the time to do it. And also be working on running a consistent race. Now, what I mean by that, if you're starting from 0, fine. What you want to be working towards is a consistent 5 or 10K before Christmas, okay? If you're already up to 5 and 10K, you want to be thinking about working up to a consistent half marathon by kind of January time. Yeah, so that's how I see it. So what you want to be doing is thinking about, how can I get to the point where I'm running a confident, consistent race at that level? Because that becomes your marker. When you can say, well, I'm running a 10K in an hour and a half, you know roughly where you're going to be at half marathon and roughly again at marathon. If you are not running a consistent 5 and 10K by Christmas, then it's time to start worrying a little bit. So I wouldn't really think too much beyond there. I mean, it's good to have a plan, but your focus really at the moment should be creating good habits, getting out there without fail, dumping the excuses, focusing on your nutrition, taking your supplements, drinking water, and really starting to embody the life of an athlete. So that's phase one. Phase one is the establishing routine phase. And starting on Monday, I'm going to do this new thing where you're going to get a score for a number of things, and it will round up to 100. And each week on the Monday, you're going to give me a score for the previous week, if that makes sense. So there'll be a score for ticking off all of your training sessions. There'll be a score for eating appropriately. There'll be a score for doing the mindset work. Okay. So yes, establishing the routine is kind of where you're at now. Then you move into the improvement phase. Now, if I was running a spring marathon, which I'm not, I would be looking for my improvement phase to probably be starting in December. Okay, so I would, because I'll tell you one of the reasons, because Christmas is a really difficult time. Yeah, you might think it's only a couple of days of celebration, but actually it sneaks in. Late nights, parties, Christmas shopping, all of these things that act as a distraction to your training. The cold weather, all it takes is a freak cold spell in January and you can write off that month. So I like to get some really good training in December, almost as a distraction, so I'm not tempted to go out on the piss every night, because you know, that's what I do. So have a think about where in your schedule you want to start that improvement phase. Now, the improvement phase is where you start to up the ante a bit. It's where your long runs become longer, but it's also where you start to up the effort levels. So even on your shorter runs, you're looking at improvement speed. You're looking at doing some maybe some track work, some hills. You're looking at getting a real kind of foundation of strength. Now, the improvement phase is going to last for maybe, you know, three months. You want a good kind of solid block of training, yeah. And within that, you're going to have some races as well, because at the end of this improvement phase is when we start getting to race prep. And race prep is the final section, the final phase of your training. And within that, you're going to have your longest ever run. Now, the longest ever run, there's lots of debate about how much that should be. I think 20 is plenty. Now, a marathon is obviously 26.2 miles, and you might be thinking, how will I know that I can run 26.2 miles if I don't run it? Now, this is the thinking behind this. For most of us, running 26.2 miles is going to take around 6 hours. So I'm doing an average now for the group, around 6 hours. It is not healthy for your body to be running six hours. It's just not. The impact on your joints, the impact psychologically on your muscles, and being able to recover from that is really, really difficult. So on your training runs, you don't really want to be running anything more than 4.5 hours, aside from that longest run. Most of marathon running is mental. From time you can run a very strong, consistent half marathon, and you've done a number of runs that are beyond that distance, including your long run, I think you're marathon ready. Because I think when you start stressing about doing the mileage, that is when you start getting injured. And it's when you start, you know, if you go up to 22 miles and you have a fucking awful, sorry for the language, but like an awful time, yeah, you are not going to look forward to that marathon. Yeah, you are not going to look forward to it, because you're going to think, God, I struggled at 22 miles. How the hell am I going to do an extra 4? But the thing is, training is completely different to your race. Yeah, the race, you don't have to worry about water. It's provided for you. You don't have to worry about your nutrition because you will have a nutrition plan. You'll have spectators. You'll have your friends and family. You'll have pacers. You'll have, crowds screaming your name. You won't need to worry about stopping and starting for traffic. It's a completely different atmosphere. It's a different vibe, and the adrenaline in your body will get you round. Once you cross that start line, the likelihood of you not finishing is minuscule. Okay, so that long run can make or break your marathon. And I've seen women try and do 22, 23, 24. I've seen some women try and do the whole marathon in training. It's crazy. It's crazy. You could, I've never even done 20 in training. I've always done around the 18 mark. I think I did 19 for my first marathon, and the other two I did 18. I think the final one I might have even only done 16 a few times. But you do not want to get injured on your last long run, and your last long run is going to be between 4 and 6 weeks, closer to 4 probably, before your race day. That isn't an awful long time to recover. So I know it's slightly different, but when I did the Spitfire Scramble in July, that was 42 miles, so I know it's more than I'm used to. That took me, I still don't think I'm fully recovered from that, and we're 3 months on. So if you are pushing your body to its absolute limit to run the furthest it's ever run, it needs at least 4 weeks of good recovery. Because after that long run, you're then starting to taper. And taper is, a lot of people get confused with tapering. They think it's you stop. You don't stop. You just start to bring those distances down again. You still want to be going out 3 times a week. You just don't need to do the distance anymore. If you're doing cross training, which you should be doing throughout all 3 phases, you want to continue the cross training, but not at higher intensity, because you want to avoid injury, you want to avoid fatigue, and you want to avoid injury and fatigue, kind of illness. You want to avoid illness. So if you're overtraining, you might be run down, tired, and then you pick up a bug. Okay, so you want to, in that final preparation, it's about getting that long run out of the way, starting to taper, and avoiding injury, illness, and fatigue, because you want to get to that start line in the best shape of your life. Okay, so that is the overview, those 3 phases, so that will help you to think about what needs to go where. Think about it in the most logical way. You have X amount of weeks, starting today, right the way through to race day, okay? You have to increase your distance like that. So even if you know nothing about marathon training, it doesn't take a genius to work out that it makes sense to go up gradually. So you could take one of those 12-week planners and literally just go, 2 miles, 4 miles, 6 miles. You could literally just go incrementally up like that, and it wouldn't be a bad plan, okay? But as I said, you have to tailor it to what else is going on in your life, okay? And you have to put those races in. I like to do maybe 3 half marathons before a marathon, because they give you really good race training, or not race training, race practice. They give you race practice. You get to practice your kit. You can practice your fueling. You can practice your pacing. So if you use a sports watch, you can kind of have a look at, what a half marathon is going to feel like, and also how you're going to feel after a half marathon, because obviously you've got to do it double again. So I like to do about 3. I like to do a 10 miler. A 10 miler is quite a nice distance to do. It's quite hard to find anything more than a half marathon. There's a few 16 milers around. Again, they're quite good. But there are some other types of sessions that you might want to put in. So I'm going to list these for you. Some of them you will choose not to, and that's completely up to you. But my marathon plan will include all of these. So I've got a list here. So you've got your blank document, and you've got an idea of the 3 phases. You want to start putting some time trials / races. Now, a time trial for me is something like parkrun. So I always use parkrun on a Saturday as a just a kind of a nice, strong, confident 5K. Now, parkrun's brilliant for attaching extra bits of running onto it. So you could run to park run and you could run after park run. So actually park run could be a nice little speedy section in the middle of a 10-mile run. Okay, so park runs are really good for that. And also you want to put your races in. So on your 12-week plan, start to pencil out where those races are. Then you want to put your long, I was going to say sturdy, let's call them that, long sturdy runs. In race plans, these will be down as long steady runs or long Sunday runs. I don't like saying long Sunday runs because I don't often get a chance to run on a Sunday. So for you, it could be Fridays. It really doesn't matter what day of the week, but you want one day of the week that is about slow, steady, increasing the distance. Okay, so you might, if you're starting from scratch, 5k might be your long Sunday run or your long sturdy run, as I like to call them, and that needs to be increasing week on week. The rule of thumb is not to increase more than 10%, but there may be a couple of weeks where that does happen. Okay, but keep an eye on yourself, keep an eye on niggles if you are increasing distance more than 10%. Then just logically start to put in some recovery runs. So recovery runs are very short and very slow. So it might just be a mile or 2 miles. Now the purpose of doing a recovery run is to get used to running on tired and sore legs and to get into a habit of doing a run even when you don't want to. So have a look at where those big races are and have a look where the long distance runs are towards the end, and the day after put a recovery run in. Because it's almost like a rest day. It's almost like a rest day. It's literally just a matter of putting your shoes on and getting out the door. The first few minutes will be agony. You'll be in pain. You can walk your recovery runs. You could do a power walk. But what you want to be training your body to do is to recover as quickly as possible. So you want to be using things like Epsom salt baths, foam rollers, one of those kind of rolly things. I've got one in the hallway that you can self massage with. Going for regular massages. When you start hitting those big distances, schedule a weekly or bi-weekly massage, because this is going to be the difference between you doing your best at a marathon and just doing enough, if that makes sense. So you've got your recovery runs. Now we start to get a bit technical. Some cross training. Yeah, you don't just want to be running all the time because you're going to get bored of it. You're going to run out of routes. You might get kind of injuries from overuse. So particularly in the early stages, when you're looking to increase your fitness, increase your confidence, possibly lose some pounds, to get into that kind of athlete mindset, you might want to think about doing kind of a cross training session. I say CrossFit because, you know, if I was training for a marathon, that would be my cross training. So you want to be thinking about weights, you want to be thinking about circuits, HIIT training, swimming. Swimming is incredible. Swimming is such a multi-purpose cross training. It helps you to stretch. It does the exact opposite of what running does to your muscles. So running compacts your muscles or contracts your muscles, and swimming lengthens and stretches. So swimming is brilliant. If you could do one swim a week, you're laughing. Cycling. When I trained for my first marathon and maybe even my second, I used cycling as a means of transport. And, you know, sometimes I was doing like 10 miles in a day. But what I learned was over time, it felt less of a training session because my legs, it didn't really it didn't have a negative impact on my legs. My legs weren't tired because I was cycling. They just improved in terms of the strength and conditioning. So cross training is going to be really, really important. And, you know, if you're struggling to fit all the sessions in, don't feel like the cross training has to be the one to go. You know, if you've got a cross training session that you love, do that over and above, you know, a run session that you're going to hate. Just always make sure you do long, steady run, because that's the one where you're going to see the improvements. Then you want to think about speed work. Now, I was at my fittest a year after having Rose in terms of my running strength and speed. And that was purely down to going to track. I started going to a Monday night track session, and I got my 5k down to 30 minutes, and I was on track for a 5-hour marathon. Now, bearing in mind, 2 years before, I had done a 6-hour marathon. So and had a baby. So, and absolutely put it down to those track sessions. Those track sessions forced me to run faster. I didn't believe I could run faster until I went to those track sessions. So have a look to see what tracks there are near you. Even if you only go to a couple to work out how it all works and to get a couple of ideas of different types of speed sessions. If you really don't want to go to a track session, you can do a lot of track work in parks. So as long as there is a circular route, and it's best if there are not roads to cross and pedestrians and stuff like that. So sometimes you can find a really nice quiet park that has a loop, and you can do exactly the same sessions at track. Also, you could do kind of intervals. Interval training is a really nice way of building up strength, and you could do a really short session. So you might be thinking, God, I've got to be out there for hours and hours. A speed session only needs to be like 20, 30 minutes, once you've got a warm up and a cool down. So they're really useful if you're busy. Speed sessions, you're going to get a lot of bang for your buck. Bucks bang for your, is that a saying? You're going to get a lot of kind of value out of quite a short session. So they're brilliant in busy weeks. Do it first thing in the morning or last thing at night. Also a great session to do with friends. So you've got other friends, marathon training, get them together to do a speed session, because it's one of those ones that often drops off the list. Then hills, pretty similar. If you don't live in a hilly area, go out there and find some hills. Or, if you do live in a hilly area, do one session that is literally 20 minutes of going up the hill, down, up the hill, down, up the hill, down. Because again, it's going to work different muscles. It's going to build your strength. It's going to build your cardiovascular capacity. It's going to build your endurance. And it's going to switch things up. We don't just want to go out there and plod and plod and plod forevermore. And then finally, and this is the one that I do neglect, I'm not going to lie, is stretching. So you want to be doing a little bit of dynamic stretching before you run. I don't think you need a lot of dynamic stretching before you run, to be quite honest, unless you are tight in certain areas. So I'm a little bit tight in my hips and groin, so I tend to do a bit of dynamic stretching around that. I don't get tight in my calves, I don't get tight in my hamstrings, so I tend not to do too much of that. However, after a run, the temptation is just to come in and have a shower and get on with your day. But actually, even just 5 minutes of stretching can really work. So I find by creating my own little routine of the stretches that I like, I'm more likely to do it. The other thing that you can do is you can stretch in the shower and in the bath. I know it's a picture to be seen, but actually, in the bath, lay out flat, touch the taps in front of you. That's a brilliant stretch for your hamstrings and for your quads. And if you are not stretching and you just can't get into the routine of it, schedule in a Pilates session or a yoga session. Get yourself a yoga mat. Have it somewhere where it's not in the way. Download something from YouTube. Get a DVD. There are apps. Jessamine Stanley is a brilliant person to look at. Find her on Instagram or YouTube. She's got loads of clips. Something like a sun salutation. If you're thinking yoga's boring, like you can't remember all the moves, just learn to do one sun salutation and just do a few of those over and over after each run. So that is it. In a nutshell, those are all the sessions that you want in your plan. You want your time trials and your races, your long steady runs that increase, your recovery runs, speed work, hills, cross training throughout, stretching throughout, and then your longest run 4 to 6 weeks out before your taper. Now, I really want to start seeing some of your training plans. So if you are following another training plan and you've decided not to go my way, absolutely fine. I still want you to write it out and scan it or take a photograph and post it into the group, okay? And please remind us when you post that into the group what your time goals are. Because then you can start looking at, if that's my time goal, what that means is I need to be running a 10K at this time, at this speed, my half marathon at this speed, and then you've got something to train towards, if that makes sense. Now, I'm going to post this in Facebook, and I'll put it on YouTube, so we've always got a link to it if you need it. Do feel free to ask any questions that you have about the marathon training in terms of creating the plan, because I know it can feel overwhelming, but seriously, if I can plan a marathon, you can. It's not rocket science. It really, really isn't. Okay, thank you for listening. Hope that was helpful. And as I said, do ask any questions that you have. All right, ciao.